Hello, this is Dr. Jacqueline with DTP-Leadership Group. This is Hot Topic Bold Talk, and it's podcast 107. My title for tonight is When Facts Fail, How Misinformation and Voter Disengagement Lead to Trump's Victory. In my last podcast, I want to mention something. I put an A after the 106, and I cannot do that in the program I use. So please ignore that. I was making an effort to tell you that I'm going to do a series on making every effort to find the messages that the Democrats did not provide to the U.S. citizens that would really hear what we were trying to say. So I just want to let you know I made a mistake with that. So this is just 107, but it is in a series. I want this series because I desire to understand exactly what happened in this election, because I think if I know what happened, then I can determine ways to move forward and have solutions that will lead to success for us. So I have been reading a great deal, and so I'll continue to do so. I do want to say that I do not support blame in any of this situation. Let's learn what happened and find a new way to do something with the Democratic Party. Now, 107 podcast is about addressing a major issue of misinformation and how it shaped the data that was presented to us. I got an email from a friend of mine who sent me the Boston Globe on the gains and losses in the election. So I thank you, dear friend, since you know who it is, since you listen to my podcast. Since I know now what happened through these resources that you give me, and that what the Democrats did in their losses. We also need to keep in perspective what happened. I also know that winning the House, Senate, and presidency can change in 2026, since that is often what has happened in the past elections. So we need to get energy up again and be invigorated to start doing something different and finding out what that is through all kinds of discussions, and then moving strongly for 2026. I will also provide a clear message about the drop off of Democrats that did not vote like they did in 2020 when they led Biden to success. Now, the power of misinformation in shaping the electorate is something that is very disturbing to me, because I know a democracy functions much more effectively when the electorate is given the correct information. So the Washington Post really did an outstanding article by Jennifer Rubins about Democrats' need to reclaim reality from the right-wing disinformation machine. This disinformation has taken over the democracy. It has provided us with very notably clear messages in this article about what we need to understand, and also their recommendations for how we can do something about it. So I'm going to read several things to you tonight from that article, because I want to be clear in what they have to say, and then I'll give some comments and move through other articles. Whether you believe that the Americans embraced President-elect Donald Trump's misogynistic, racist, and bullying persona because they misunderstood what he stood for, or because they liked what he stood for, or because they believed falsely that the economy was in a recession, or because they could not afford to buy their own home, or because of some combination of all these, we cannot ignore the success of the right-wing media, disinformation, and network in shaping how millions of Americans viewed this election. Now, here's some more comments from the article. Will Bunch, The Philadelphia Inquirer put it succinctly. The things that we've been talking about since Tuesday, an economy that hasn't worked for the working class since the time of Ronald Reagan, anxieties among white voters about potential end to white privilege and the patriarchy, and a Democratic Party that's lost touch with the greater American middle. All factors in today's election. But nothing mattered more than this. Donald Trump was returned to power by the most badly informed electorate in modern American history. I want to repeat that one for you. Donald Trump was returned to power by the most badly informed electorate in modern American history. And I'll keep quoting from the article. As now a important thing to discuss that Reuters polls found was that Americans who primarily got their news from Fox News and conservative media and social media and others are more likely to answer questions about inflation and crime incorrectly than Americans, the larger group of Americans who listen to other things. When tens of millions of Americans believe things that simply are not true, Democrats' accomplishments matter very little. Their message does not reach the intended audience. And frighteningly, you can get people to vote away their democracy as long as you create a false world for them to believe in, as historian Heather Cox Richardson said. And I sat there for a moment and I thought, no wonder we had a situation, because the misinformation created a false reality, and it was totally opposite of what is reality. And then they say in the right wing media world, the economy is in a shambles. Crime is surging, and kids are being lured into sex reassignment surgery. In such an atmosphere, Democrats' positions and proposals become divorced from the public's perception of politics. I want to pause for a minute. That one is a hard one to hear, but it is true. In such an atmosphere, with the kinds of things I've just told you, the Democrats' position and proposals are totally divorced from the public's perception of what happened. Then I want to talk about the echo chambers and the rise of a parallel media reality. Because I thought this was fascinating in this article and how informative it was. Here are the right-wing media, Fox News and the entire News Corp of Fox News, Newsmax, One America News Network, the Sinclair network of radio and TV stations and newspapers, iHeartMedia, formerly Clear Channel, the Bot Radio Network, which is a Christian radio, Elon Musk X, the huge broadcasts like Joe Rogan and more set the news agenda in this country, says the writer of the New Republic. So these are the things we're dealing with, and we're going to have to somehow address. Uninformed voters and the limits of democratic messaging are a serious problem. It behooves Americans who are about the future of democracy, decent governance, and the fate of their most vulnerable fellow Americans to understand the fundamental difference differences between media reality that envelops a substantial number of voters. And I think it's disturbing. ProPolitico, for example, documented an operation peddling vicious right-wing propaganda disguised as religious news. Hear me, disguised as religious news. This kind of news was traced to a former TV reporter. You can read my script and hear a lot of these names. Metric Media and the right-wing super power, the PAC that is funded by a conservative billionaire. So that's what we're dealing with. Brookings Institute, Daryl M. West wrote, the waves of false, menacing messages and the broadening on social media platforms promoted through funny memes, picked up and publicized by mainstream media outlets, circulated by internet mega influencers, and amplified by leading candidates during rallies, debates, and interviews is what happened. West concluded on views about inflation and the overall economy, people in 2024 consistently reported very negative opinions compared to actual inflation and unemployment and the GDP figures. The Economist magazine even had a cover story saying the U.S. economy was the envy of the world. Yet voters had a dismal view of the economy and rated Harris negatively for the negative situation. The article included the serious need to combat the avalanche of disinformation. Sadly, it does not reside primarily in legacy media, which millions upon millions of Americans never see or read. It certainly does not reside in outlets that offer false equivalents. Thank goodness the article provided us with some ideas for solutions. They make it clear that we are going to need to foster new forms of media to counter the right-wing misinformation media. There's a need for a new crop, as they talk about, of relevant opinion makers, local media, and investigative journalists is required to get basic information to voters and combat the right's conspiracy-laden hysteria. Then democracy and good governance stand a fighting chance. They and with democracy requires public virtue and an informed citizenship. Pro-democracy funders would do well to organize a comprehensive study of the right-wing ecosystem and its impact on the electorate. Getting the truth out to the wider electorate will require a new, culturally relevant media ecosystem firmly rooted in liberal democratic values. Now, I appreciate the suggestions they've given us, and I encourage you to read this article because you have my references at the end of the podcast, and I think it would be very helpful to you. I'm going next to why Democrats stayed home. The voters dropped off of 2024. And I'm going to summarize the Boston Globe with two articles. First, the article is by John Hancock, and it says, the Democrats stayed home in 2024. Where were they, and what do we need to know? This is a detailed analysis of results that have far surpassed any of the other articles I've read about the election and the analysis of the election. And here are the points that my friend and I agreed on, which are important for a summary for you as the listener. The narrative of the 2024 election has so far been defined by a broad switch right in the electorate. That shift right in the electorate with President-elect Donald Trump garnishing high votes shares in counties across the United States that it did in 2020. But that doesn't mean he got dramatically more votes this time around. In many counties, data showed Vice President Harris's support failed to materialize at levels she needed to win, like they had for Biden in 2020. The apparent drop in turnout was harmful to Harris, particularly in counties where Trump also lost votes or only marginally increased his raw vote totals. In the 2,066 counties where Trump's votes total failed or increased by 5% or less, Harris saw her vote totals decrease on average more than 7.5% per county, while turnout in these counties was down 3% per county. Across these counties, which make up 2/3 of all the counties with votes tallied, Trump added just over 225,000 votes, while Harris lost a staggering 2.15 million compared to 2020. Where was everybody? The crucial swing states of Pennsylvania offers a striking example. In Philadelphia County, more than 36,000 votes evaporated for Harris from Biden's 2020-11, but Trump only increased his vote total over 2020 by 11,000 votes. Unfortunately, though, a monumental divisiveness and targeting campaign was built in a short time frame. Nuances proved challenging and impactful, but they complimented her on what she was able to do in the short time. But I think those statistics are staggering and we need to pay attention to it. Then there was a shift in youth support. Trump appealed to the younger generation. When President Biden defeated Trump 4 years ago, voters between age 18 and 29 backed him 61% to 36%. But on Tuesday, Harris carried the demographics by only 6%, 52% to 46%, according to an analysis of the AP VoteCast survey data by the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement Circle at Tufts University. Democratic presidential candidates had enjoyed significant double-digit leads among young voters going back to 2008. I think it's interesting that a young woman, I'll just give his first name, Justin, who's 21, who's at Tufts University, said Democrats struggle to relate to young men and their view of masculinity. The way Democrats viewed masculinity does not resonate with Gen Z men, he said. I think with trying to push Doug and Tim Walz as the models of masculinity, men just stood up and said no. There are other comments I want to make about this. Other men and women provided some thoughtful, provoking statements in this article that I have not included. There's a tough choice for a young, there is a tough choice for a lot of young voters due to the fact that they wanted to support Harris for reproductive health, and a vote for Trump was for personal financial independence, as they looked at it. At Northwestern, another young man who's 19 voted for Harris and said, she believes gender, I'm sorry, it's a woman, 19-year-old woman from Northeastern, voted for Harris and said she believes gender bias was a factor in young men's support for Trump. I think there's still a lot of deep-rooted biases in society that might be coming into play when voting, either consciously or unconsciously, especially for men who might have these biases, she said. It's hard to grasp the idea of a woman in power and in control. And I would encourage you to read this article because there's some excellent statements from a lot of young people in this country. Now, something that I found really interesting was the prediction markets versus the polls. And I'm going to pay attention to the prediction markets from now on. Because the prediction markets, you saw Trump's victory coming, and the polls did not show it. So the second article is in the Boston Globe's entitled Polls Showed a Race in Dead Heat. How did prediction markets know Trump would prevail? The article is by Bray, and I think she has got some fascinating comments that will help you understand what a prediction market is and how it probably has a much better way of determining who's going to win. Here's our quotes. The public opinion polls and Tuesday's presidential election would be a nail biter, but I looked a lot different at online prediction markets where people bet real money on the outcome. And then they give some of the markets if you would like to know about them, which showed a consistent lead for Donald Trump. And they were right in the end. The election wasn't even close. Trump easily exceeded the 270 electoral votes he needed. And unlike his 2016 victory, he appears on track to win a majority of the popular vote. And this, we know that it's already happened. Meanwhile, sites that relied on data from public opinion polls consistently predicted a razor-close race. The respected 538 site could in itself say that 50 to 49%, and the statistician Nate Silver had 48.6% for Harris versus 47.6% for Trump. And Real Clear polling gave both candidates 48.5% chance of victory. However, the investors were much more clear about what was happening. It's important to understand what the prediction markets work so we can understand how they have a much better predictive or prediction of elections than the polls. Prediction markets let investors or gamblers buy and sell contracts similar to traditional futures contracts, but they're linked to real world events. So let's say somebody decides they're going to buy a contract at a betting site, and they're going to bet that NASDAQ's 100 stock exchange index will close the year above or below 18,500. And that's what they're betting on. That's what they bet on. It's a real event. An investor thinks the answer is no, and they can buy contracts for 9 cents each, reflecting the fact that few people believe this will happen. So the lower the cent points, the more people don't think something's going to happen. But if the NASDAQ 100 does fall that far, each of those 9-cent contracts will be worth $1. Buy 1,000 of them for $90, and you make a 910 profit, less transaction fees. So that's how it works. Now, I thought this was even more interesting. When the index on the morning of the election was selling Trump's victory contracts at 57 cents while pricing Harris's victory contracts at just 42 cents, he said we should have listened. The same goes for another index, which favored Trump over Harris 62 cents to 38 cents. So the gamblers were buying based on what they had done. Academic researchers say the prices of prediction contracts can accurately forecast the future because investors won't put their money into a contract without a lot of thought and research. And I think this article is worth reading and getting more detail from it. Now, there is a stark decline in turnabout across key Democratic demographics. So I'm going to the article, Why Was There a Broad Drop Off in Democratic Turnout in 2024? And this article addresses the Democrats that failed to turn out to vote at the rate they did in 2020 when they ousted Donald Trump. Was written by Michael Bender, and it's in the New York Times. Voters in liberal strongholds across the country, from city centers to suburban stretches, failed to show up to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris at the levels they had for Joseph R. Biden Jr. 4 years earlier, contributing significantly to her defeat by Donald Trump, according to the New York Times. Analysis of preliminary election data. So anybody that tries to blame Kamala Harris for this, I think they're ridiculous. Let's look at the Democrats that stayed home and didn't vote. The numbers help fill in the picture of Mr. Trump's commanding victory, showing it may not represent the resounding endorsement of his agenda that the final electoral college votes suggest. So there's some hope here if we listen to their message. Mr. Trump won the White House not only because he turned out his supporters and persuaded skeptics, but also because many Democrats sat this election out, presumably turned off by both candidates. Counties with the biggest Democratic victories in 2020 delivered 1.9 million fewer votes for Ms. Harris than they had for Mr. Biden. The nation's most Republican-heavy counties turned out an additional 1.2 million voters for Mr. Trump this year, according to the analysis of the 47 states where the votes count is largely complete. And we know it's complete now. The drop-off spanned demographics and economics. It was clear in the counties with the highest job growth rates, they didn't vote, counties with the most job losses, and counties with the highest percentage of college-educated voters. Turnout was down, too, across groups that are traditionally strong for Democrats, including areas with large numbers of Black Christians and Jewish voters. The decline in key cities including Detroit and Philadelphia, made it exceptionally difficult for Ms. Harris to win the backgrounds of Michigan and Pennsylvania. The drop-off is an extraordinary shift for Democrats who were motivated by Mr. Trump's surprise victory in 2016, had turned out in eye-popping numbers for the three elections that he had anything to do with. They clipped his power in Washington in 2018, removed him from office in 2020, and defeated many of his handpicked candidates for battleground races in 2022. So what we have to do is communicate with the Democratic Party and the members of it and the people that did not vote and the ones that did, and figure out how we can turn out to do something to protect our democracy. Lessons for Democrats, I think, and building a rejuvenated campaign, I think, was also a part of this article. Here are some of the things I took away from the article. As Democrats, we need a new way to re-engage voters, since I believe many are fatigued by the anti-Trump message. Voters are distrustful of both parties. We know that. We have to address it. Here's the point that I had not thought of. Some analysts point out that Ms. Harris was simply the latest political casualty of the post-pandemic global trend favoring challengers, no matter the incumbent's politics. And this happened in places like not only the United States, but Japan, South Africa, South Korea, and Great Britain. Other reason that I believe or mentioned in this article are Harris did not have enough time to overhaul the campaign after taking on from Biden, who dropped significantly from his wins in 2020. So all of a sudden we have Biden, who is not popular anymore, and then Kamala Harris takes it over. I will leave to you, the listeners, to read the other reasons that were formulated that contributed to her defeat. We need to look internally at the Democratic Party. I'm not blaming anyone that's at home. I'm just asking you to look at and watch the next 4 years, because in 2026, we can make a difference. So I want to conclude this podcast in this way. The 2024 election results offer a profound opportunity for reflection within the Democratic Party. The influence of misinformation, the disconnection between the media's narrative and voter perceptions, and a fatigued base all underscore the need for a strategic overhaul. Moving forward, Democrats must craft a more clear message, one that reaches beyond traditional boundaries and addresses the issues that matter most to a diverse electorate. As we assess these lessons, let us embrace the chance to realign and reinvigorate our mission to inspire, engage, and empower voters. The future of the Democratic movement will be shaped by our ability to reconnect authentically with those we aim to represent. Thank you so much for listening to me this evening.